So let me begin by asking you, what is your definition of leadership? A leader is simply somebody who can get themselves up in the morning and show up for work on time. It is the most basic example of self-leadership. So why is this simple definition of leadership so critical? Well, one, it's imperative that nobody define leadership simply by a position or a role. More importantly, you should not define leadership by some personality attribute. Or you shouldn't define leadership in such a way that it exists at certain levels in the organization and not others. And finally, you have to help everybody understand that all leadership begins with self-leadership. With this simple definition, I think we can begin to focus on some forgotten facts regarding leadership. Your leadership capacity is determined by your ability to manage complexity. Furthermore, your capacity for leadership functions a little bit on your ability to handle stress. Then, beyond your capacity, your ability to flourish as a leader requires the ability to accurately prioritize information and data that is coming at you. And finally, your leadership capacity is heavily determined by your level of self-awareness. Let's talk about those four things in greater detail. Complexity is about being able to handle non-linear decision-making. You actually get information coming at you from multiple angles, and it's non-linear. It's not A, B, C, D. It's often A, D, K, J, B, C. And complexity means that you have the ability to take in this non-linear information and look at it. More importantly, you never have to live in the world of certainty. Your job as a leader is to bring clarity in the midst of uncertainty. And in light of that, and this is really a real trick in complexity, is that you can simplify these complex realities so that everyone is very clear on what actions are required of them. Now, obviously, that's pretty stressful. And so leaders who reach a high level of capacity or important, prominent roles in an organization manage their stress well. In fact, stress is somewhat energizing for them, and they enjoy it, they embrace it. But they also understand how to process it. And that is because they'll know how to engage in activities of renewal and recovery and do so. Stress is not really an issue unless it is prolonged over a long period of time without any recovery. Actually, no stress at all is dead, and not many people are ambitious about that future. So, you also need to possess the attribute of being able to prioritize data that's coming at you. And when this information is coming at you, can you quickly understand what information is relevant now, what information may be relevant later, and what information is not relevant at all? Most often somebody comes into your office and they're complaining about another employee and they're telling you the whole story. The majority of information in that story is completely irrelevant and must be dismissed. However, there are nuggets and kernels of information that you're given that give you great insight on what you're supposed to do as a leader. Great leaders have that skill set. But not only that, great leaders are incredibly self-aware. What that means is that you understand when your natural way of being, your natural way of operating may not be what's called for right now. When you being you is actually counterproductive. So, let me ask you, on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being I can barely manage my own life, and 10, I have a degree of mastery over those 4 forgotten realities of complexity and stress and data prioritization and self-awareness. Where do you score yourself out on a scale from 1 to 10? Go ahead and write that number down. Now, we have asked countless individuals this question, and interestingly enough, the majority of answers fall somewhere between a 5 and a 7. Here's why this matters. The number is not nearly as important as answering the question, what are you going to do next to move in the right direction on the leadership scale? At Awake Consulting and Coaching, we have the most ideal option for you. Take our self-leadership scorecard. Our self-leadership scorecard looks at 30 practices over 6 arenas of life that will help you to understand ways of renewing yourself from stress or increasing your ability for complexity or helping you in your level of self-awareness or being able to discern a variety of pieces of information. You'll be able to see how frequently you're currently engaging in certain practices, as well as what practices you're completely ignoring. It will give you a score and a range that will tell you what you might need to work on next to grow in your leadership capacity. So what do you do now? There's 4 things that I would recommend. Take the self-leadership scorecard. Identify the practices that you need to increase in frequency. Beyond that, begin to work and form habits that will help you to grow in your self-leadership. And then finally, I would encourage you to consider working with a coach. Obviously, we would love to work with you, but regardless, if you're committed to growing in your leadership capacity, having somebody else giving you perspective on how you are maturing and growing in these areas would be greatly helpful. At Awake Consulting and Coaching, we would love to help you in that regard. Thank you.